But I would like just today to introduce a new theme. In fact, it's really very much a flow out of the last theme that we have been working on. We've been looking at the book of James, and James is primarily a book of practical encouragement, practical instruction on the subject of what real faith looks like. And so what I would like to do is for the next couple of weeks, take that head knowledge that we have and look for examples as to how we can mimic people, we can look at people, we can learn from different people as we find them in the Scripture in an endeavor to practicalize that which we've already spoken about as being practical. So I hope that will be good for you. I'm sort of looking at the scope of your faith. Now, the scope of your faith is going to be very much dependent upon your vision of who God is. If you have a small vision, it's probably because you have a small God. If you have a big vision, it's probably because you have a bigger God. And the scope of your vision, I don't think, can ever be big enough, because we all know that there is no measure, there is no known extent to the extent of who God is. And so I want to talk about the scope of your faith and what it means to put your faith to work, what it means to live out faith, as we've said in our devotional series in the morning, that faith is given for your good, but more for God's glory. And I hope that that's the passion on your heart today, to give glory to God. Now, today I want to suggest to you that your God may be too safe. We all know that He can be too small. But I want to suggest to you that sometimes your God can be too safe. And my mind goes back to that Old Testament passage with Moses in Exodus chapter 20, where Moses had been speaking with God, and God had he really wanted to meet with the people, but the people came to Moses when Moses came and said, "This is what God has said." They said, "Moses, we're so glad that you're telling us that, because we know it's not safe to get too close to God. So Moses, we hope that you're going to continue. Please will you be our intermediary? Please will you keep us from getting too close to God, because we fear God. And God is not a safe place for us to be in this particular context." I want to take, however, nothing away from the fact that God is a safe place, but He's not safe in Himself. Here's a safe place where we're told that He's a refuge in our time of trouble. I hope you run there when you're in trouble. He's a safe place. He's a safe place to those who may be hurting, to those who have been disillusioned, to those who have been disappointed. He's a great safe place. He's a refuge for our strength. He's a tower that we can run to, because He's a safe place. But in and of Himself, because of the nature of who He is, God is not safe. And I want to talk to you a little bit about this today. Now, for our case study, we're going to look at one of my favorite people in the Bible. His name is Elisha. And I'm going to read from 1 Kings and 2 Kings just now, the story that illustrates what I'm trying to say. So open your Bible to the last chapter of 1 Kings and chapter 2 of 2 Kings. Now, Elisha definitely did not have a safe God. You can tell that because he had no fear of man. He had no fear of the consequences of doing what God had told him to do. He expected that God, because of God being who God is, would direct him and send him to places that would not be safe. And so he stood against incredible prevailing wisdom of the majority. He was a prophet, and he stood alone, and he said, "Thus saith the Lord." He encountered incredible challenges. And he is responsible, we believe, for more miracles as an individual other than Jesus, as spoken about in the Bible. And this guy had no fear, and he knew that God was not a safe place. His God was not safe. And his story is one incredibly encouraging and just inspiring story. Now, I remember as a young man, and I remember sitting around the fire listening to soldiers, hardened soldiers, tell their war stories. And I'm this little 18, 19-year-old guy sitting with these soldiers. And I remember them telling their stories, and I would feed on these stories of adventure and excitement and adrenaline, and I would feed on those stories, and they inspired me. I'm going to tell you, as I look at the story of Elisha, I'm inspired by those stories. Can you imagine sitting and having Elisha for lunch one day? Can you imagine him coming to your place and having lunch with you? You would have to be inspired by the courage of this man who knew no fear and whose God indeed was not safe. Now, before I get into this, I want to suggest a metaphor. Metaphor is just a picture of something I'm trying to illustrate to you. And there are basically, I think, maybe oversimplifying it a little bit, but there are basically two types of Christians today. The first type is seen in the metaphor of being a tourist, and the second one is in the metaphor of being a traveler. There is a difference between being a tourist and a traveler. You see, a tourist just takes a trip. A traveler is going on a journey. A tourist is somebody who piles up the baggage, fills his car with everything that he might need, from the teddy bears through to the kitchen sink, because he's on his way to, he's taking a trip and he wants to enjoy the trip. He wants to take everything he can for that trip. But a guy on a journey, or a traveler, travels very light. He holds lightly to the things that are around him. He knows that the words of Paul say, get rid of all the junk, do not carry any baggage, because you cannot run the race effectively carrying a whole bunch of stuff with you. So he travels really light. A person taking a trip, a tourist, is in to get to a destination. He wants to get to a nation. For a traveler, the destination is the journey, and the journey is the destination. Because for us as believers, if you get the parallel, which is not too difficult to get, for us the destination is not here on earth. The destination is one that's going to be in heaven. But people who are tourists just take a short trip. They want to enjoy it. For the motivation of a tourist is fun. The motivation of a traveler is a mission. The motivation of a tourist is when are we going to get there? How many times have you heard your kids when you're going on holiday, Dad, we need it? You know, for a traveler, he doesn't care. He's not cared about the time. He's on a journey that he knows is going to take his whole entire life. He's on a journey. And because he's on a journey, comfort is not important to him. He's willing to take the uphills and trudge on those uphills and enjoy the ride on the downhills. For a tourist, he always says, oh, it's so great to be home. You know, a traveler never says that this side of eternity. Now, if you get the difference between those as they relate to different Christian and different Christians' experiences, you know, travelers go in a destination that has a beginning and an end. Tourists just go around in circles. They always end up where they began. And there are many pictures here that we could take and align them to different classes or different categories of people who call themselves believers. Well, to start the ball rolling here, get our journey, Elisha is very much not a tourist. He's not in for the fun. He's not in just to take a trip. He has decided to follow, in the Old Testament context, Jesus, no turning back. Now that song you sang there, those in the team, was exactly what I'm going to be talking about today. We didn't plan this. So people, I think God may have something to say to some of us today. Let's read from 1 Kings chapter 19. And I just want to read verse 19 and through to verse 21. This is all about Elisha. Okay, remember Elijah was the first prophet that is spoken about here. Elijah was used of God, but now Elijah is going home, and there needs to be a succession plan, and God has chosen for Elisha to be the succession plan. So this is what it says. So Elijah went from there, and he found Elisha, son of Shaphat. He was plowing with 7 yoke of oxen, and he himself was driving the 12th pair. Elijah went up to him and threw his cloak around him. Elisha then left his oxen and ran after Elijah. Let me kiss my father and mother goodbye, he said, and then I will come with you. Go back, Elijah replied. What have I done to you? So Elisha left him and went back. He took his yoke of oxen, he slaughtered them. He burned the plowing equipment, he cooked the meat and gave it to the people, and they ate. Then he set out to follow Elijah, and he became his attendant. Then if you would go to 2 Kings, chapter 2, and we pick a story up from there. When the Lord was about to take Elijah, now Elijah now had Elisha following him, and he was his servant. In the King James Version it says, he was there to wash the hands of Elijah. He was his servant. When the Lord was about to take Elijah up to heaven in a whirlwind, Elijah and Elisha were on their way from Gilgal. Elijah said to Elisha, stay here. The Lord has sent me to Bethel. But Elisha said, as surely as the Lord lives, and as you will, I will not leave you. So they went down to Bethel. The company of the prophets at Bethel came out to Elisha and asked, "Do you know that the Lord is going to take your master from you today?" "Yes, I know," Elisha replied, "but do not speak of it." Then Elijah said to him, "Stay here, Elisha. The Lord has sent me now to Jericho." And he replied, "As surely as the Lord lives and as you live, I will not leave you." So they went to Jericho. The company of the prophets at Jericho went up to Elisha and asked him, "Do you know that the Lord is going to take your master from you today?" "Yes, I know," he replied, "but do not speak of it." Then Elijah said to him, this is the third time, "Hey, Elisha, stay here. The Lord has now sent me to the Jordan." And he replied, "As surely as the Lord lives and as you live, I will not leave you." So the two of them walked on. 50 men of the company of the prophets went and stood at a distance, facing the place where Elijah and Elisha had stopped at the Jordan. Elijah took his cloak or his mantle, he rolled it up, and he struck the water with it. And the water divided to the right and to the left, and the two of them crossed over on dry ground. When they had crossed, Elijah said to Elisha, "Tell me, what can I do for you before I am taken from you?" "Let me inherit a double portion of your spirit," Elisha replied. "You have asked a difficult thing," Elijah said. "Yet if you see me when I am taken from you, it will be yours, otherwise not." As they were walking along and talking together, suddenly a chariot of fire and horses of fire appeared and separated the two of them, and Elijah went up to heaven in a whirlwind. Elisha saw this and he cried out, my father, the chariots and the horsemen of Israel." And Elisha saw him no more. Then he took hold of his own clothes and he tore them apart. He picked up the cloak that had fallen from Elijah and went back and stood at the bank of the Jordan. Then he took the cloak that had fallen from him and he struck the water with it. "Now where is the Lord, the God of Elijah?" he asked, when he struck the water, and it divided to the right hand and to the left, and he crossed over. Now, in the English language, it's an intriguing thing because some of the smallest words that there are there have the biggest impact and the biggest implication. The word "it" has got a very broad application, a tiny little word, but you can apply it to virtually everything. Everything can be an "it." That camera to me say, "Mark, pass me it." That chair, pass me it. Anything can, pretty much anything can be an "it." So I have chosen 5 applications of the word "it" to share with you in light of the story that we have just read about Elisha. It is a kind of a universal substitute term for pretty much anything. The first "it" that I would like to speak to you about is the "it" of the mantle. And if you want to know what you have to do with the mantle, you have to pick it up. Now for Elisha, what he had to pick up was the mantle of Elijah, which was basically Elijah's legacy. Every value, every passion, everything that Elijah had was wrapped up in that mantle. That mantle was a mantle of identity, and you have to pick that up in order to follow Christ. Now, for Elisha, it came in the form of a mantle. Jesus, years later, sits with his disciples and he says, "I've got something that you have to pick up," just as he had to pick up the mantle. He says, "You will take up your cross and you will take it up and you will follow me." So Elisha had to pick up a mantle, and we have to pick up the cross. Now you will know that you're carrying a mantle if you can identify with a few things. But the problem is that we know that the mantle, we know that the New Testament picture would be that of the cross. Jesus said, "Take up your cross and follow me." There are things about this thing that intrigue people. And so some people would look at the cross and say, "Wow, let's study this. Oh, that's really interesting that this would be God's plan." Some people just walk past, as they did in the time of Jesus, and just ignore it. Some people study it. Some people will acknowledge it. Some people will be impressed by it. Some people will applaud it. But there's only a handful of people, as I've seen in my experience, who have actually picked it up. The "it" being the cross that Jesus says is ours, as depicted by the mantle of Elijah. Now, you will know that you're carrying it if you can identify with a few things. Certainly in the story, this would apply. If you're a traveler and you are carrying the cross, you will know you're carrying the cross because you can look behind and see that you've left stuff behind. It wasn't long before Elisha could look behind him after picking up the mantle and see that he left his old life behind. He left the plow behind. He left his cows behind, and he had killed them. He left his parents behind. He left his way of life, his generating of income. He had left it all behind in order to follow Elijah and the legacy of the mantle. The application is not difficult for us, is it? When you choose to follow Christ, you will know you're following Christ for the same reason. You'll know that you are following Jesus when you can look behind you and you can say, man, I'm a traveler. I'm not a tourist who just goes around in the same thing and ends up where I was. I'm a traveler. I'm on a journey. And I can see the milestones of my Christian faith that I've left behind. And I can see that I've left behind the old life, the old sin, the old baggage, the old things. I can see I've left that all behind. It's a mark of a traveler. It's a mark of somebody who has truly chosen to follow Christ. The cross before me. Where's the world right now? The world behind me. It's behind. And you can know that it's there. Have a look and you see Peter and James and John, as they were fishermen. Jesus comes to them and says, hey guys, do you want to come follow me? Do you want to come and travel with me? And within minutes, they could look behind and see they'd left their nets behind. You could have a look at Elisha and his plows and his oxen. They left something behind. The intriguing thing here is Elijah did not make it easy for him. In fact, Elijah 4 times, 3 times in the second passage, one time they said to Elisha, I think you should go back. This is not a safe journey. Elisha, what have I done to you? He says in the first passage. What have I done, Elisha? Ignore me. I should never have called you. I don't want you to come into this dangerous area because where I'm about to take you is a place that is not safe because God is not safe. And he tried 4 times to tell Elisha, just go back. You don't have to do this. You can go back to the comfort of your home and the comfort of your income. And Elisha, just stay at home. And he didn't make it easy for him. You know, as I look at my ministry, and I sometimes think I'm a bit embarrassed because I think I've made it too easy for people to become Christians. You know, they say, oh, just pray this little prayer. It makes you a Christian. Oh, it's rubbish. That doesn't make you a Christian. Who says saying a few words like saying abracadabra? You know, now all of a sudden you're this. No, you're not. It's part of it. It's part of it. That prayer of repentance is vitally important, but it's not on and of itself going to make you a believer at all. And I think we have sold true Christianity really short by making it too easy for people to say, put up your hand. You want to be a Christian, yeah? Put up your hand. And we say, now you put up your hand, you become a Christian. Wow, you may have, or the chances are you may not have, because the proof of the pudding is still yet to be seen. And so we see Elijah here doing exactly the same thing, saying, go back 4 times, stay here, go back. God is not safe. Now, we have this inside of ourselves, this desire for safety. And we come up with some of the silliest cliches. And this is one cliche. Generally, cliches are cliches because they might be true. But here's one that is not true, where we have said, the safest place in the world is in the center of God's will. Try telling that to Daniel in the middle of the lion's den. Try telling that to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego as they stand about to be thrown into the fire. Oh, that's the safest place that God is in the middle of the will of God. It's not. Try telling the martyrs of old that the safest place on earth is to be in the center of the will of God. It's rubbish. As I see it, I see God's will taking them into places that are dangerous, places that are physically challenging. And it's not the safest place in the world to be in the center of the will of God, depending on what safe looks like to you. We tell people, follow God and He'll keep you safe. I don't believe that to be true at all. So the first thing we have to do is to pick it up. The second is I want to suggest to you we need to burn it up. And that's easy to see here. It burned every bridge with the past so that you have no way of going back. It's scorched earth policy. You can't go back there, so you need to burn a few bridges. I have heard and seen Christians who say, well, Let me just keep a few links with the old life, with my old way of doing things, just in case this Christian life is not all that it's cut out to be. And then at least I could go back again. Well, people, it's an all or nothing thing. You burn it up. You burn those bridges with the past. You know, have a look at a number of examples. Have a look at the fire aspect of Moses and the golden calf. Those idols had to be burnt. The golden calf was crushed and it was burnt. And the rest of the people put in water and they had to drink it. Gideon, before he could really be used of God, had to burn his father's idols. Something has to burn to be left behind, and you need to burn the bridges to the old life. Jesus for us, many of these idols is saying to us, they're not all bad. An idol does not have to be a thing of wood and stone that you worship. It might be, but it doesn't have to be. Some of the idols in our lives are not always bad things. And we often nail the rich young ruler and think that he had an idol in his life, but God is nothing against money. We would think that God is something against money by telling him to sell all he has and give it to the poor and come follow him. That's not what Jesus is saying there. What he's saying there is you love your money more than you love God. If you love God and have money, that's very cool. But there is a pec order here. We have to love God first, and then anything else that seems to follow, we love it thereafter. Everything else, even it might be a good thing in your life, may need to burn. Job is a phenomenal human being, is he not? Job lost everything. Lost his family, lost his income, lost his everything, reputation. He lost a lot. And you know how amazing it is that he's able to say, the Lord has given, the Lord has taken away, and blessed be the name of the Lord. Let me tell you how he was able to say that, because it's easy. You see, Job never made an idol of his kids. He never made an idol of his income or his wealth or of his prestige or of his reputation. He never made an idol of these things. So when they were taken from him, it wasn't a big deal to him. And yet you look at us and we think, man, if these things were taken from me, my life would fall apart. Therefore, people, you need to have to ask yourself, could this be an idol, albeit a good thing, in my life? The Lord has given, he's taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. He never made an idol of that. That's why Abraham's test, when they said to Abraham, God said, take your son, your one and only son, and put him on an altar and kill him, was just a test to see who was first in his life. And when Abraham was about to kill his son with that knife as he lay on the altar, and God stopped him with an angel and said, now I know, or God knows, that he's first in your life. That you're willing to sacrifice your vision, your purpose, your dream was wrapped up in that kid. And as he laid on the altar and he was about to kill it, he did it with a sense of saying, Lord, I don't understand, but if that's what you want, you've got it. That's what travelers do. They travel light. They don't carry the baggage, even though it may to the world look like a good kind of baggage. In Luke chapter 9, verse 6, Jesus says this, he who has put his hand to the plow and turns back is not worthy of the kingdom. People, can we make this really practical now and say, you need to have, I need to look at my life and say, what are some of the bridges that I need to burn? Maybe there's old relationships that are still hanging there. You know, that you may need to burn those bridges. Don't burn the people, just burn the bridges. To those things. Old habits that you may have had. Issues of unforgiveness and bitterness. Burn those darn bridges, people. Burn them, man. And then you can't go back to those places. I'm convinced that's why God took Moses to the Red Sea and he didn't have him build a bridge to get to the other side. Because the people, when they got to the wilderness side of the Red Sea, they would have said, oh, well, we've got a bridge. If we don't like it in the wilderness, we can always go back to Egypt, which is what they did want to do. But they couldn't go back because there were no bridges. People, you may need to go and I may need to go on a bridge burning exercise. He who puts his hand to the plow and turns back is not worthy of the kingdom. The third, give it up, is this one. You've got to give it up. Give it up. You may have to give up your ego. Elisha had to. It says that Elisha, the King James Version I told you, he became the hand washer for Elijah. That means he became his servant. And anybody who ever wants to serve God with the greatest capacity will have to play second fiddle. You know what second fiddle is? Second fiddle is the instrument that makes the first fiddle sound best. You don't give prizes necessarily to the second fiddle. The second fiddle is there to make sure that the first and the main instrument gets the prize. And if you look at the leaders around the world today, and anybody who has not had to play second fiddle at some stage is not one who's worth following, is one who's not going to last very long. Because second fiddle is a place where great lessons are learned. The second thing we have to give up is we have to give up this desire for safety. We're besotted with safety. God is not safe. And we need to go to places where no one else would want to go. Just have a look outside the window here. We call this the battleship. And I'm going to put this battleship in a little fish pond, people. That battleship is going to take us to places where it's not going to be safe. That's why we built a battleship. We haven't built a fancy hotel here, conference center. We built a battleship to take us into a realm of places where it might be a little unsafe from time to time. I find it quite interesting that people, when they look at the church, are very protective about the church. They say it's my safe space, and I like that. I think the church should be a safe place for us to come to and be real and get help for the things that we need to. But and then we get the critics who say there's too much of the world in the church. Have you heard of that? Well, the opposite is also true. There's too little of the church in the world. And that to me is a bigger problem. Have you noticed even with the coronavirus, there is a thing out there that says that when the unclean meets the clean, and I use these terms loosely, when the unclean meets the clean become unclean. They get the disease. But if you look at Jesus, the opposite is true. When the clean, Jesus, met the unclean became clean. That's why he uses that beautiful verse about we are the salt of the earth. What good is the salt if it's stuck in a cellar? A salt has got to be distributed across that which is putrefying and dying for it to have its true effect. And so that's what it means, and that's not safe to do that. So as much as this gathering together in the church, and I love the church, and I love doing this, I'm blown away. This is just, this is so cool, But if this is all there is to church people, we've missed the point completely. It's not about the world and the church, it's about the church being in the world as salt and light to a dead and dying world around us. And that's not always a safe place to be. Whenever Jesus, the clean, touched the unclean became clean. Lepers were clean because the clean touched the unclean. That woman with the issue of blood reached out. She was unclean and she came in contact with the clean, and the clean made the unclean become clean. That's the agent of the church around us. Let's move on. I'm in a bit of a rush now. My time is going. Let's do number 4. Don't mess it up, people. Don't mess it up. And you have a look around and you see the Bible, how many people started well but messed it up. Have a look at Esau. He messed it up because he was greedy, and he messed it up because he would rather have the cheap thrill of the soup and the pot and the stuff that his brother had made, rather than have the perfect will of God. He sold his blessing for a cheap thrill. He messed it up. David messed it up by private sin. Samson messed it up because he insisted on playing games with God and with what God had done. Peter messed it up at the point of panic where he sunk in the water, and unfortunately God was gracious and Jesus redeemed him quickly. But people, please don't mess it up. But as much as those are quite radical, you know what I think the most common mess up is? Is the mess up of complacency and comfort. We just get too comfortable and we mess it up. You say, how can that be? Well, have a look at the scriptures, and the scripture says comfort is overrated. Your safety, people, in the context of what God's mission to save the world, is totally overrated. He's not nearly as concerned about your safety and your comfort as he is about you fulfilling the mission for which he has called you. We produce this wishy-washy God who is there to answer my every little plea and discomfort. That's not true at all. Have a look at the story here where Elijah says to Elisha, Stay at Gilgal. Gilgal's a comfortable place. Stay in Jericho, Elisha. It's a much better place for you to hang out. Or stay at the Jordan River. That's a nice little holiday venue. You could stay there, because it was comfortable and he could be content. But complacency always grows in the environment of comfort and contentment. Ask the children of Israel. They became content in the wilderness. How do you become content with disappointment, disillusion, and dryness? Well, they did. They didn't want to go to the promised land. They said to Moses, Moses, we're used to living here. They became content, and as a result, they messed it up. One last one. We're going to double it up. Elijah says to Elisha, what can I do for you? And Elisha says, hey, man, can you give me a double portion of your spirit? Elisha learned from that because there were two more stories. Maybe there were even more. I don't know. I didn't count them all. Where in Elisha, 2 Kings chapter 4, he learned well the phrase, is there anything more I can do for you? Because he asked that of a woman who had no child. And naught plus naught times naught is still naught. So he gave her more than double. He gave her the child that she wanted. He prayed for her and she gave birth to this child. A little later, or a little bit earlier in 2 Kings chapter 4, he meets a woman who's devastated, who's got nothing, and she's about to lose everything. And he says to her, what can I do for you? And she says, oh, Elisha, all I've got is a little bit of oil. Elisha says, that's all you need. Double it up, double it up, double it up, double it up. They just keep doubling it up. And when you've got enough, you can go and sell that. And you'll have enough money to raise your kid, and you're going to be fine. Just keep doubling it up. Now, for us as a church, with our new battleship over here, let me tell you, I'm going to suggest we need to double it up on faith. The next generation people who are going to be leading this church organization, or this organism, because it's not an organization, it's alive and it's vital. Those next generation people are sitting in the pews of our church, because we're not going to be here forever. You're going to have to double it up. And our prayer is that you would double up on faith. Double up on compassion. The next generation of people, you young oaks, double up on compassion. Double up on your passion or your hatred for injustice. Double up that passion. And watch what God will do in you and through you in the days and the years to come. I need to close. We began by saying, your God may just be too safe. Might just be too safe. You know why he's too safe? Because he's just a little bit too small. Lizzie's going to sing for us. The team are going to come up here and sing probably one of the most well-known songs that you probably know, How Great Thou Art. And I'm hoping, coming up, guys, that as they sing and Lizzie sings this song for you and you sing along, that you will get a picture of the bigness of God, because that could change the way that you live. It honestly could. Errol on Wednesday night spoke beautifully about Psalm 19. You guys need to come to Wednesday night church. It's amazing. It's awesome. Anyway, Errol spoke on Psalm 19. And he made an interesting point. He said David wrote that psalm. Now, in the time of David, there was only, all he had was the first 5 books of the Bible. He didn't have the Bible as we have it. He just had the books of the law. And you say, well, how could somebody who just had the books of the law of Moses and those laws, those books, how could he write so beautiful a song? There is, he didn't just have the law, he had the heavens as well. Let me read to you before Lizzie sings, just very quickly, the Psalm 19, because David took what he knew about God as seen in the law and knew about what he saw in God. As he lay on his bed, he says, God, I lie on my bed and I contemplate who you are. And as he had the law and he had the magnitude of the bigness of God, this is what he wrote. The heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day, they pour forth speech. Night after night, they display knowledge. There is no speech or language where their voice is not heard. Their voice goes out into all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. All he had was the 5 books of the law and the starry heavens. And look at what he did. His God was not safe because his God was incredibly big. I hope as Lizzie and them sing and you join in, that your picture of God might just get bigger today, because then your safety won't be that big a deal. Come, let's stand and sing, shall we?